It all started when I was just 17, living in a family that seemed perfect from the outside, but was anything but. My mom traveled often for work, leaving me and my dad, John, to hold down the fort at home. Growing up, I always thought dad was the ideal father kind, funny, and never too strict. He wasn't the type to hover or ask endless questions. Instead, he gave me space while still being there when I needed him. To me, he was like a guardian angel, someone who could do no wrong. But everything changed the summer mom left for one of her long business trips to Europe. This time felt different, not because of her absence, but because of how dad acted when she was gone. At first, it was subtle, almost unnoticeable. His friendly demeanor turned into something else entirely. The way he looked at me made my skin crawl. It wasn't the warm gaze of a loving father anymore. It was sharper, hungrier, as if he were seeing someone else standing in my place. One evening, we were sitting together on the couch watching TV, and out of nowhere, he said, "You're growing up so fast, Rachel. You remind me so much of your mother." His voice sounded casual, but his eyes told a different story. They lingered on me longer than they should have, making me shift uncomfortably under his stare. That moment stuck with me, replaying in my mind over and over again like a warning sign I couldn't ignore. As the days passed, the tension between us grew thicker. Every glance, every word, every movement felt loaded with meaning. I began dreading our evenings alone together. There was an invisible weight pressing down on me whenever he was near, as though the air itself had become suffocating. Once, during dinner, he reached across the table to refill my glass, brushing his hand against mine in the process. It was such a small gesture, but it sent a jolt through me, a mix of fear and confusion that left me trembling. I quickly pulled away, avoiding eye contact, and muttered some excuse about needing to finish homework. Looking back, I realize now that this was the beginning of something far darker than I could have imagined. Each day brought new moments of unease, each more unsettling than the last. What scared me most was that I didn't know what to do. How do you confront the person you've always trusted most in the world when they suddenly feel like a stranger? And yet, deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The foundation of our family, the trust, the love, the safety was cracking beneath my feet, and I had no idea how to stop it from crumbling completely. The days after Mom left for Europe felt heavier than usual, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. At first, Dad seemed to be his normal self, the same easygoing, laid-back guy who joked around and made sure I didn't feel lonely. But as the week wore on, his behavior shifted in ways that made me increasingly uneasy. It wasn't just the compliments or the lingering glances anymore. It was something deeper, more unsettling. One evening, I was sitting on the couch wearing an oversized nightgown, scrolling through my phone while half watching TV. Dad walked into the living room, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "You look so beautiful tonight, Rachel," he said softly, his voice carrying a strange warmth. "You remind me exactly of your mother when she was younger." His words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. My stomach churned, and I felt goosebumps rise along my arms. On the surface, it sounded like a harmless compliment, but beneath it lurked a meaning I couldn't fully grasp, one that felt inappropriate, invasive even. I forced a weak smile and mumbled a thank you, trying to mask how uncomfortable I felt. The room suddenly seemed smaller, the atmosphere heavier, as if the walls were closing in on me. He didn't leave, though. Instead, he sat down next to me, closer than he ever had before. His hand brushed against mine as he reached for the remote control, and I instinctively pulled away, my heart pounding like a drum. That was only the beginning. Over the next few days, his actions grew bolder. He would casually run his fingers through my hair, saying things like, "You're growing up so fast," or I'm lucky to have such a wonderful daughter. Each touch felt deliberate, loaded with an unspoken weight that left me feeling exposed and vulnerable. Once, when I was helping him prepare dinner, he stood behind me, guiding my hands as I chopped vegetables. His breath tickled the back of my neck, and I froze, unable to move or speak. When he finally stepped back, I dropped the knife onto the counter, pretending it had slipped, and muttered something about needing to study. I started avoiding him as much as possible, retreating to my room under the guise of homework or exhaustion. But no matter where I went, I could feel his presence looming over me, watching, waiting. It was exhausting, this constant state of alertness, this gnawing fear that something worse was coming. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but the words caught in my throat every time I tried. How could I explain what I barely understood myself? And yet, deep down, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep running forever. The tension between Dad and me had reached a breaking point. I could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating, every time we were alone together. That night, Mom was supposed to be out late with her friends, leaving just Dad and me at home. I tried to stay in my room as long as possible, but hunger eventually drove me downstairs. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. As I entered the kitchen, I found Dad standing by the counter, his back turned to me. For a moment, I considered retreating, but my stomach growled audibly, betraying my presence. He turned around, his face lighting up with a smile that felt too practiced, too forced. "Hey, Rachel," he said casually, as if nothing unusual lingered between us. I muttered a quick response, avoiding eye contact as I reached for a snack. But then it happened. His hand brushed against mine as he handed me a plate. It wasn't just an accidental touch. It sent a jolt through me, like an electric shock coursing through my veins. My breath hitched, and I instinctively pulled away, but instead of letting go, his fingers tightened around mine. He held on for what felt like an eternity, a few seconds, maybe, but long enough for my heart to race uncontrollably and my chest to tighten. I turned my head sharply, trying to hide the panic rising in my throat, but he simply smiled, as though this moment meant nothing. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm, almost amused. I nodded stiffly, forcing a weak smile, but inside I was screaming. His grip finally loosened, and I stepped back, clutching the edge of the counter to steady myself. The room seemed smaller now, the walls pressing in on me, and I couldn't breathe deeply enough to calm the storm raging inside. Just as I thought I might collapse under the weight of it all, the doorbell rang a sharp, sudden sound that shattered the suffocating silence. We both froze, startled by the interruption. Before either of us could react, I rushed toward the door, desperate for any escape. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. There stood Mom, suitcase in hand, her expression unreadable. She wasn't supposed to be back until tomorrow. "Surprise," she said, her voice cheerful yet tinged with uncertainty. Her arrival momentarily eased the tension, but as I glanced back at Dad, I saw at the same calculated distance, the same unsettling gaze that had haunted me for days. Something dark still simmered beneath the surface, and I knew this wasn't over. The tension between Dad and me had become unbearable. Every moment we spent together felt like walking on thin ice, each step threatening to crack the fragile surface beneath us. One evening, after Mom had been back for a few days, Dad approached me in the hallway. His expression was calm but intense, as if he'd been rehearsing this conversation for hours. "Rachel," he began, his voice steady yet unnervingly soft. "Can we talk?" "Just you and me." My heart raced at his words, panic rising in my chest like a tidal wave. I shook my head quickly, avoiding his gaze. "There's nothing to talk about," I muttered, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound firm. He didn't let it go. Instead, he took a step closer, his hand reaching out to rest lightly on my shoulder. The touch sent a jolt through me, and I instinctively flinched. "Rachel, you can trust me," he said, his tone almost pleading. "We're family. We'll always be a family." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. It wasn't just an offer of reassurance, it felt like pressure, like he was trying to force something unspoken between us. My breath hitched, and I stumbled backward, desperate to escape his grasp. My foot caught on the edge of the staircase behind me, and for a terrifying second, I thought I might fall. I managed to catch myself against the railing, my pulse pounding in my ears as I stared at him, wide-eyed and shaking. Mom started noticing changes in me around that time. She would glance at me during dinner or while we watched TV, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you okay, Rachel?" she asked one night, her voice gentle but probing. I forced a smile, clutching my glass of water tightly. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired from school." But even as I spoke, guilt twisted inside me. How could I tell her what was happening without destroying everything? Without breaking apart the life we'd built together? I couldn't bear the thought of losing our family, no matter how fractured it already felt. Despite my silence, Mom seemed to sense that something was wrong. She began asking more questions, though never directly about Dad. Still, I avoided answering truthfully, afraid of what revealing the truth might mean. For her, for me, for all of us. Each unanswered question weighed heavier than the last, and I found myself retreating further into my own mind, trapped between fear and loyalty. I wanted to scream, to run away, but instead I stayed silent, hoping against hope that this nightmare would somehow end on its own. The tension in our house had become unbearable, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. For days after Mom's unexpected return, we all pretended everything was fine. She went about her routine as if nothing unusual had happened, but I could see it, the faint furrow of her brow when Dad and I exchanged awkward glances, the way she lingered just a little longer in the room during our rare moments together. It was clear that something didn't sit right with her, though she hadn't said anything outright. As for me, I tried to keep my distance from Dad, avoiding any situation where we might be alone. But fate has a cruel sense of humor, and one Saturday evening, Mom decided to go out with some friends again, leaving the two of us at home. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, the air seemed to thicken. The silence was suffocating, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. I retreated to my room, hoping to stay there until Mom came back, but hunger eventually drove me downstairs. The house felt eerily quiet, the kind of stillness that makes every creak of the floorboards echo like thunder. When I reached the kitchen, I saw Dad sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. He glanced up as I entered, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he turned off the television and stood, his movements deliberate, almost predatory. My heart began pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. "Hey, Rachel," he called, his voice casual but laced with something darker beneath the surface. "Grabbing a snack?" I muttered a barely audible response, avoiding eye contact as I rummaged through the pantry for chips. Just as I was about to bolt back upstairs, he spoke again, his tone softer this time, yet no less unsettling. "Rachel, can we please talk? I don't like how things have been between us." His words froze me mid-step. Panic surged through me, but what choice did I have? Reluctantly, I turned to face him, my stomach twisting into knots. He approached me slowly, each step deliberate, until he was standing far too close. His eyes locked onto mine, searching for something, reassurance, permission, maybe even defiance, but I couldn't look away. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low and steady, "about this tension between us. We need to clear the air." His hand reached out, brushing against my arm, and I flinched instinctively. My pulse raced, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Before I could pull away, his grip tightened, pulling me closer. His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "Don't be afraid of me, Rachel. I only want to protect you." His words sent a wave of nausea crashing over me. Protect me? From what? From whom? I wanted to scream, to push him away, to run out the door, but my body betrayed me. I stood frozen, trapped in his grasp, unable to move or speak. My mind screamed at me to fight back, to do something, but fear paralyzed me. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision, and I felt like the walls were closing in around me. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. And then, just as suddenly as it began, salvation arrived, or so I thought. The sharp ring of the doorbell cut through the oppressive silence, startling both of us. Dad loosened his grip slightly, and I stumbled backward, clutching the counter for support. Without waiting for him to react, I rushed to the door, desperate for escape. When I opened it, my heart sank. There stood Mom, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with worry. Her gaze darted past me into the house, scanning the scene as if trying to piece together a puzzle. "Rachel?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is everything okay?" I couldn't answer. Words caught in my throat, choking me. Behind me, I heard Dad's footsteps approaching, slow and hesitant. Mom looked at him, then back at me, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning realization. "We need to talk," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Now." I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to breathe. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, spinning out of control. My knees buckled, and I leaned against the doorframe for support. Everything I had feared, everything I had tried to ignore, was finally coming to light. And yet, instead of relief, I felt only dread. What would happen now? Would Mom leave him? Would our family shatter completely? Or worse, would they blame me? Dad stepped forward, his face pale but composed. "What's going on?" he asked, feigning innocence. But Mom wasn't fooled. She crossed her arms, her jaw set in determination. "Inside. Now." Her tone left no room for argument. As they walked past me toward the living room, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, watching helplessly as the foundation of my family crumbled before my eyes. The moment Mom stepped into the house that evening, I knew something had shifted. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on me with a look of quiet devastation. "Rachel," she began, her voice trembling but firm, "is there something you want to tell me?" The weight of her question crushed me. My throat tightened, and tears welled up in my eyes before I could even think of an answer. I wanted to speak to explain everything, but the words were trapped somewhere deep inside me, suffocated by guilt and fear. Instead, I stood there, frozen, shaking my head as silent sobs racked my body. Mom didn't wait for more. She turned away from me, her steps heavy with determination, and walked straight into the living room where Dad was standing. He looked pale, his usual confident demeanor replaced by an unsettling mix of panic and resignation. "We need to talk," Mom said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. At first, their conversation was hushed, fragmented whispers exchanged between clenched teeth. But it didn't stay that way for long. Within minutes, their voices rose, sharp and accusatory, filling the house with tension so thick it felt like the walls might collapse under its pressure. "You've been acting strange ever since I got back," Mom shouted, her face flushed with anger and pain. "And Rachel, she's been avoiding you like the plague." "What did you do?" Dad tried to defend himself, stammering excuses and feigning confusion, but his attempts only fueled her fury. "Don't lie to me, John," she snapped, slamming her hand down on the coffee table. "I saw how you looked at her. Don't think I haven't noticed. Each word they exchanged felt like a dagger piercing my heart. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I sat on the staircase, clutching my knees to my chest, trying to block out the sound of their argument, but it followed me everywhere into my ears, my mind, my soul. By the time the shouting subsided, I felt hollow, as if all the life had been drained out of me. The next morning, Mom sat me down in the kitchen. Her expression was calm now, but her eyes still carried the same sorrow I'd seen the night before. "I've hired a lawyer," she said flatly. "This marriage is over." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Divorce wasn't just a concept. It was real, raw, and devastating. Worse still, she wouldn't meet my gaze. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Rachel?" she asked, her voice soft but tinged with disappointment. "How could you keep this from me?" Her question broke whatever remained of my resolve. I buried my face in my hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I wanted to explain, to make her understand that I hadn't known how to handle what was happening, that I'd been afraid of destroying our family. But no explanation would change the fact that we were already broken. Over the following days, Mom moved out temporarily, leaving me alone with Dad in the house. She avoided looking at me during visits, focusing instead on packing or making phone calls. It was as though I reminded her of everything she wanted to forget. As the reality of our shattered family sank in, loneliness consumed me. Every corner of the house echoed with memories of happier times, now tainted by betrayal and mistrust. I hated myself for not speaking up sooner, for letting things escalate this far. Guilt became my constant companion, whispering cruel reminders of what I had lost and what I could never get back.